For me, playing in bands was by far the most disappointing and unfulfilling part of my musical life. But before I get into the reasons why, I just wanted to be clear that I'm not saying that bands are all bad all across the board. I am talking strictly about my own personal experience. If you love playing in bands, and if it genuinely works for you, then that's great. This video is about why for me bands never worked, and why going solo absolutely did. I'm also not going to name any of the bands I was in before I launched my solo project, Malice Divine. What matters most is that I noticed a lot of the same patterns repeating in those bands, as well as my personal attempts at starting a live lineup for Malice Divine. I tried playing in bands multiple times throughout my musical life. This wasn't a result of one bad experience, more so multiple rather unpleasant experiences that have culminated in the stance that I have on bands. I also genuinely wanted it to work. Many times, I really wanted it to work. At one point in my life, I really idealized the idea of playing in a band and having that sense of brotherhood that comes along with it. I thought it would be a genuinely fulfilling and fun experience. And oh boy, was I ever wrong about that. I consistently showed up prepared and committed, invested my time, energy, and money into the endeavors of playing in bands, and the outcome kept being the same. What I eventually realized was that the issue was much bigger than individual situations. It was a deeper misalignment between how bands operate and how I work. So that brings up the question, how is it that bands operate, and how is it that I work personally that differs from how bands operate? First of all, bands require constant alignment between multiple people, and creative decisions are made by consensus or compromise. Now that's something that may be totally fine for other people, but personally for me, I've always been someone that always had a very strong musical vision for what they wanted. So that always resulted in me feeling rather unfulfilled. The vision gets majorly diluted as more voices enter the situation. From my experience, momentum is often dependent on the least consistent and dedicated person. And that was always true for me with the bands where I was the leader and main songwriter especially. Even in bands where I wasn't the leader, similar things happened. In bands, from my experience, I've often come across the case that a lot of people that I was playing with had much other higher priorities in their life than my vision or the vision of the band or whatever. And I understand that, some people have other obligations in life. That's 100% valid. But I've always noticed that progress tends to stall in those situations, especially when things need to be negotiated. Personally, for me, I've always found that I work the best when I am completely autonomous, not needing to bounce ideas off anybody else, not needing anyone's permission to pursue my ideas and my vision. That's when I've always been the happiest as a musician. I don't thrive in creative negotiations. It always left me feeling creatively unfulfilled and even resentful. The more people involved, the more difficult it is to actually move things forward. I felt less creative, not more, because it didn't sit well with me that I needed to also keep in mind that I need to appease musical preferences of my bandmates. And in some cases, even the musical capabilities of some of my bandmates, because some of them were not able of executing my vision. And for that reason, writing, at least in the context of a band, really slowed down, and ideas felt constrained. It was very easy for me to have momentum stalled this way. It was also rather unpleasant for me to be around people who did not understand or vibe with my vision, or even if they did to an extent, didn't care about it nearly as much as I did. There was also a lot of energy that was spent navigating people. Because when you're playing in the band, especially when you're a leader, lots of energy goes towards coordinating people, trying to get schedules aligned, trying to get people on board with your vision, trying to move things forwards towards my goals. And unfortunately for me, from my experiences, a lot of people just end up holding me back for numerous reasons. Whether they just weren't nearly as committed as I was, they had personal problems I didn't want to deal with, they had financial problems, personal problems holding me back, and just quite frankly, I just didn't want to deal with any of that. That might sound kind of selfish on my part, but it is what it is. I don't really care. As a result of all this, there was a sense of tension that came up in me, and in some cases, in the other people I was playing together with in whatever band I was in at the time. And quite frankly, that made for a very depressing and unfulfilling experience. Creativity for me started feeling heavy instead of inspiring. It wasn't feeling fun anymore. A lot of times I just felt like the odd one out, and that left me feeling depressed and isolated and resentful. I also encountered quite a bit of toxic behavior during my times playing in bands. These toxic behaviors include people saying that they were committed or that they wanted to play, but then their actions saying otherwise. I've also dealt with some passive-aggressive communication from some people I played music with, where instead of communicating with me about whatever their issue was, like a reasonable adult, they would just leave passive-aggressive jabs on my social media posts, tying back to what I was saying about people saying like they're committed, but then their actions showing the opposite. I've also dealt with quite a bit of ghosting behavior, where I'll be trying to communicate with someone about setting up times to rehearse, but yet they would ghost me for days on end while I see them posting frequently on their Instagram stories. I've also dealt with some pretty egotistical and cocky behavior, where I've been mocked to my face, and then when I call them out for their bullshit, then they try to gaslight me into thinking that I am the problem. Narcissistic much, ain't it? I've also dealt with some pretty toxic and combative behavior when I spoke up about certain things that I didn't like. So essentially, trying to be punished just for speaking my mind, for speaking up. In a respectful way always, by the way. I was never rude or condescending about any of this. Unfortunately, I can't say the same about some other people I worked with. I've also dealt with some unprofessional behavior around live shows, where a certain few members of bands I played in sabotage our performances. I've also dealt with toxic comparisons from people associated with whatever band I was in, and these were comparisons that were not constructive at all. If anything, they were just uncalled for and condescending, and just created more friction and created more tension than anything constructive. I've also dealt with people that I played in bands with talking behind my back, not confronting me to my face about anything. I've experienced situations where someone's ego showed up as disrespect, and that was a huge signal that this was not the right environment for me. But there's a much more positive side to all of this that I'm discussing here, and that is the changes that I've seen to my life as a result of becoming a solo artist. There was many benefits that I found to being a solo artist that were a huge game changer for me. That included full ownership of my vision, no sort of musical compromise whatsoever. As someone who takes pride in their musical vision, this has been absolutely crucial for me. Another thing is that ideas, as a solo artist, for me, have been able to move from concept to reality much faster. I don't have to rely on people who are not nearly as committed to my vision as me, or who are putting a lot of other things ahead of the vision that I have for my music. And then as a result of focusing on just my own musical vision, writing music felt very fun again. It gave me that spark, that sense of joy that I got when I initially started writing music many years ago. The music I was working on started to sound fully like me, like what I wanted to do. As a result of all of this, I was able to consistently make progress. I've released so far 2 solo albums independently under my solo project Malice Divine. And I have a 3rd one currently in the works as of the making of this video. My energy went fully into the creation of the music instead of any sort of bullshit social dynamics that I did not care for. And ultimately, I felt much more pride in the work that I was making, because it really is fully my vision. No compromises whatsoever. This is when the creation of music has always felt the most energizing for me. When I can fully focus on bringing my vision to life, without needing to appease anybody else's standards or preferences. And yes, I'm aware that may sound incredibly selfish, but like I said before, as a musician, personally for me, my vision for my music is absolutely crucial, and I refuse to dilute that ever again. There are other aspects of being a musician that I also love as well, that I love much more than any band I ever played in. One of those other things for me is being a guitar teacher. Teaching is about creation too, and I get to help students grow musically. It's structured, focused, and rewarding, which is something that I personally can't say for my experiences playing in bands. There's been no creative politics in teaching whatsoever, and it's always reinforced my love of music. It's never been something that took away my love of music, which is something that playing in bands often did. Teaching has provided me with a much healthier form of musical and personal connection than playing in a band ever did. So let's talk about the lessons in all of this. Some musicians thrive in collaboration, and that's totally fine. Whereas for others, such as myself, thrive in autonomy. Problems can arise when you force the wrong structure, such as, for example, with me, trying to force over and over again to fit into a band context. My experiences have without a doubt proven that solo is superior for me. This sort of misalignment also has a cost. It can lead to burnout, frustration, loss of momentum, resentment, creativity becoming a burden instead of something to find joy in. And this is something that took a lot of time for me to be able to admit to myself. Letting go of the expectation of needing to have a band was absolutely a freeing experience for me. It was absolutely liberating to stop trying to fit into a model that just didn't suit me. And progress was just able to accelerate greatly once I've really accepted how I work the best. And again, I didn't arrive here quickly. I've tested out multiple different paths, and I gave the band path an honest try numerous times. And from my experience, it's clear that this is not the right path for me. If it is for you, that's seriously fantastic. But for me, solo work gave me clarity, momentum, and fulfillment. And that's why I will be staying with it indefinitely. I'm also still open to the possibility of eventually performing live with Malice Divine. However, I will absolutely be very selective with who I choose to work with. Because at the end of the day, Malice Divine is still my solo project, and always will be. And I understand that some people might not want to commit themselves to that. But regardless of whether I play live with Malice Divine or not, what I know for certain, is that the solo artist path has been the path that has given me the greatest amount of joy and happiness as a musician in my life. If this video resonated with you, liking this video helps, as well as commenting and subscribing to my YouTube channel. Thanks once again for your support, guys. I will see you all in the next video. Cheers.